Welcome to Psyche Talks.
Glad to be here.
Today, we're diving into something really fascinating.
Influence and persuasion.
Exactly. And specifically, those kind of mental shortcuts we all use.
The automatic triggers, yeah.
Yeah,
The ones that guide our decisions without us always realizing it.
right. We're drawing a lot from Robert Cialdini's work today.
His book, Influence, is pretty much the cornerstone here, isn't it?
It really is. Trying to figure out why we say yes so often.
Getting under the hood of compliance.
Yeah. So think of this deep dive as a way for you listening.
To maybe get a better handle on these forces.
Exactly. To spot them in your own life. Okay, so let's start with this idea of automatic behavior.
Right. Cialdini makes a big point about this. Humans, well, we rely on these shortcuts.
These sort of fixed action patterns, rules of thumb.
Precisely. The world is just incredibly complex, right?
Too complex to analyze every single thing.
Exactly. We'd be paralyzed. So we need these efficient ways to navigate.
It reminds me of that Whitehead quote.
What about civilization advancing?
Yeah. Civilization advances by extending the number of operations we can perform without thinking about them.
That sums it up perfectly. These shortcuts are, in a way, essential for progress, for functioning.
Like discount coupons. That's a simple example he uses.
Right. You see a coupon, you automatically think cheaper, good deal.
You don't usually stop and do the full math every time.
Almost never. It's a trigger. Price reduction equals value. It's an automatic response.
And these shortcuts, they're not foolproof, obviously.
No,
Yeah.
definitely not. We make mistakes using them. Sometimes we get tricked, even.
But we kind of accept that trade-off.
We have to, really.
Yeah.
The efficiency usually outweighs the occasional error. They're necessary mental tools.
And probably becoming more necessary.
Seems likely, as life gets faster, more complex, more information overload. We'll probably lean on these shortcuts even more heavily.
Okay, so that sets the stage. What's one of the big ones?
Well, reciprocity. The rule of give and take.
Ah, yes. This feels really fundamental, deeply ingrained.
It is. Across cultures. The anthropologist Marcel Mauss talked about it extensively.
The obligation to give, obligation to receive, and the obligation to repay.
Exactly, and it's powerful. But that middle one, the obligation to receive, that can be tricky
How so?
because it can reduce our ability to choose who we end up owing a favor to. Someone can impose a debt on us by giving us something unsolicited.
Ah, like in that Regan study with the Cokes.
Precisely. Joe gives some participants a Coke, totally out of the blue, didn't ask for it.
And then later, he asked them to buy raffle tickets.
And the ones who got the Coke bought like twice as many tickets, even if they didn't particularly like Joe.
Wow, so the unsolicited gifts still created that feeling of obligation.
Absolutely. And notice the asymmetry. Joe chose the initial favor and the return favor. He controlled the exchange.
That unwanted favor thing reminds me of the Hare Krishna strategy back in the day at airports.
Oh yeah, the flower or the book. They just thrust it into your hand. You felt awkward giving it back.
So you felt obligated to give a donation when they asked right after, even for something you didn't want.
Exactly. It exploits that obligation to receive, creating immediate indebtedness.
And we want to get rid of that feeling, right? That sense of owing someone.
It's psychologically uncomfortable for most people.
Mm-hmm.
So much so that we might agree to an unfair exchange just to clear the debt.
Like in the Reagan study, again, the Coke cost, what, 10 cents back then?
Something like that, yeah.
And people spent an average of 50 cents on tickets to repay it.
A 500% return on investment for Joe. It shows how a small initial favor can trigger a much larger return favor, just to relieve that psychological burden.
That's potent. The student lending her new car example you mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, that's perhaps an extreme case of loyalty from reciprocity, but the guy had jump-started her car previously.
Yeah.
The principle holds. Small favor, big return sometimes.
So it's not just about direct gifts. It works in negotiations, too. Compromise.
Absolutely. This leads directly into the rejection then retreat technique.
Oh, okay. Break that down.
You start by making a larger request, one you probably expect to be refused.
Okay, like asking for a huge donation first.
Exactly. Or a very expensive product. Then, after the refusal, you retreat to a smaller request, the one you actually wanted all along.
And the second request seems more reasonable in comparison.
Yes, partly because of the contrast principle. But crucially, your move to the smaller request is seen as a concession.
Ah, so the other person feels obligated to make a concession too, by saying yes.
That's the idea. It triggers their reciprocity rule. You compromise, so they feel they should too.
The classic example is the Boy Scout selling tickets for the circus for, say, $5.
Right. You say no. Then he says, well, how about buying one of our chocolate bars? They're only $1.
And suddenly, buying the chocolate bar feels like the right thing to do, like you're meeting him halfway.
Exactly. You mentioned using this in sales yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Selling service contracts. Start with the 3-year plan, knowing many would balk.
And when they hesitated.
You'd retreat to the 1-year plan. Seemed much more palatable then, and it works surprisingly often.
Because you made a concession. Plus, as you said, the contrast effect makes the 1-year deal look even better compared to the 3-year one.
These principles really layer on top of each other.
They absolutely do, which makes them even more powerful.
Okay, let's shift gears. Commitment and consistency. This is another big one.
Huge. It's our deep-seated desire to be, and importantly, to appear consistent with what we've already done or said.
Once we make a choice, take a stand, we feel this pressure.
Internal and external pressure. To stick with it. To behave in ways that justify that initial decision.
Like those Canadian psychologists found at the racetrack.
Yeah, that's a fascinating study. People were much more confident in their horse's chances after they placed the bet than just before.
Even though nothing actually changed about the horse or the race.
Nothing at all. Just the act of commitment, placing the bet, made them feel more certain, more consistent with their choice.
It's a powerful driver. Festinger, Heider, Newcomb. They all talked about this need for consistency.
It's central to our motivation. And sometimes it can make us do things that aren't even in our best interest, just to stay consistent.
Like in that beach study. Moriarty's experiment.
Right. Someone leaves a radio on a beach towel, asks the neighbor, can you watch my things?
And some people agreed, made that small commitment.
Exactly. Then a thief comes along and tries to steal the radio. The people who agreed to watch. Far, far more likely to intervene.
Compared to those who hadn't been asked.
Dramatically more likely. That initial verbal commitment changed their behavior. They had to be consistent with their role as watcher.
So how do people, use this against us or with us?
Well, the classic is the foot in the door technique.
Start small.
Start with a tiny request, something almost anyone would agree to, like signing a petition or answering a short survey question.
Okay, and then?
Then you follow up later with a related but much larger request, like asking for a donation or to put a big sign on their lawn.
And because they said yes to the small thing,
they feel more pressure to say yes to the big thing, to stay consistent with their initial action or statement of support.
Like those charity callers, starting with, how are you feeling this evening?
Right. If you say, fine, thanks, it makes it psychologically harder to then sound like a Scrooge when they ask for help for the less fortunate. Howard's cookie sales study showed this works.
That initial positive response creates a little commitment.
Exactly. It's subtle but effective.
The examples from the Korean War POW camps are pretty chilling, though.
They are. How captors got prisoners to make very small, seemingly inconsequential anti-American or pro-communist statements. Maybe just copying something down.
Starting small again.
Yes. But then they'd gradually increase the requests. Write an essay, participate in discussions. Because the prisoner had already made that tiny initial step, that small collaboration.
They started to see themselves differently.
Potentially, yes. They needed to rationalize their own actions. Maybe I am a collaborator. And that made compliance with larger requests more likely to maintain consistency with this adjusted self-image.
Wow. And salespeople use this too, right? Get a small order first.
Absolutely. Get their foot in the door with a trial size or a minor product. Once you're a customer, even in a small way.
It's easier to sell you the full line later. You're already committed.
Right. The initial commitment paves the way.
Does writing things down make a difference?
Oh, definitely. Written commitments are particularly powerful.
Why is that?
Well, first, there's physical evidence. It's harder to deny or forget. Second, writing it down seems to solidify it more in our own minds. It requires more effort than just saying something.
And it can shape our self-image.
Yes, we tend to align our self-perception with what we've written. And interestingly, it can also convince others. Remember that study where students read essays defending Castro?
Even when they knew the writers were assigned that position?
They still tended to believe the writer actually held those views. We see written statements as reflecting genuine belief.
And the effort involved matters too, like those tribal initiation rites.
Yes, the more effort, sacrifice, or even pain involved in making a commitment, the more valuable it becomes to the person, and the more likely they are to stick with it. Think hazing rituals, boot camps.
Right, you wouldn't go through all that for something you didn't really believe in.
Precisely. And public commitments are stickier than private ones.
Because your reputation is on the line.
Exactly. We want to look consistent to others.
But for it to really last, Cialdini says it needs to feel like an inner choice.
Yes, that's crucial. Which brings us to the low ball tactic.
Ah, the car dealership special.
Often, yes, they get you to agree to buy a car at a really attractive price. You make the decision, you start filling out forms, maybe you even imagine driving it home.
You're committed,
Yeah.
mentally at least.
Right. Then, just before you sign, something happens. The manager disallows the deal, or an error is found, or some options you thought were included suddenly cost extra.
So the great price disappears.
But because you've already made that initial commitment, built up all these justifications for buying that car.
You often go through with the deal anyway, even at the higher price.
Surprisingly often, yes. The initial commitment grows its own legs, supporting the decision even when the original reason that great price is removed. They throw the low ball.
Like that Tim and Sarah example, even in making a choice under pressure can strengthen the commitment later when things change.
Yes, the act of choosing itself creates that internal pressure for consistency.
Okay, fascinating stuff. Let's move on to liking, the friendly thief, as Cialdini calls it.
Yeah, this one seems almost too obvious, but its mechanisms are really interesting. We simply prefer to say yes to people we know and like.
Makes sense. But what makes us like someone? That's the key.
Cialdini breaks down several factors. One big one is physical attractiveness.
The halo effect.
Exactly. We tend to automatically assign positive traits like talent, kindness, honesty, intelligence to good-looking people.
Even if we have no actual evidence for those traits.
Often, yes. Studies show attractive candidates get more votes in elections, attractive applicants are more likely to be hired, attractive defendants often get lighter sentences.
That's actually kind of disturbing when you think about the implications.
It is. It's a powerful, often unconscious bias.
What else drives liking?
Similarity. We like people who are like us.
In what ways?
Opinions, personality traits, background, lifestyle, even dress. Remember those studies where people were more likely to give someone spare change if they were dressed similarly?
Right. We feel a connection to people who seem like us.
It builds rapport quickly. And compliments, we tend to like people who flatter us.
Even if we suspect they're just saying it to get something.
Even then, yeah. We have a fundamental hunger for praise, and we tend to warm to those who provide it.
Okay. Attractiveness, similarity, compliments. What else?
Yeah. Contact and cooperation. Generally, familiarity breeds liking. The more contact we have with someone in positive circumstances, the more we tend to like them.
But the circumstances matter. Right.
Crucially, if the contact involves conflict or frustration, like some early school desegregation experiences where competition was high, it can actually increase dislike.
But cooperation, that
Yeah.
works differently.
Yes. Working together towards common goals is a powerful way to build liking and break down barriers. Charisse Roberts' cave experiment is the classic example.
The Eagles and the Rattlers, those groups of boys at summer camp who initially hated each other.
Exactly. But when they were forced to cooperate on tasks that benefited everyone, fixing the water supply, pooling money for a movie, the hostility melted away and friendships formed.
So shared goals overcome group differences.
It's a very effective strategy. Aronson's jigsaw classroom applied this directly.
How did that work?
In newly desegregated schools, kids were put in groups where each student had only one piece of the information needed for the group to succeed on a task. They had to rely on each other, teach each other.
So they had to cooperate instead of compete.
Yes, and it led to reduced prejudice and increased liking across ethnic lines. Made them see each other as resources, not rivals.
That's a really positive application. Okay, one more factor for liking.
Conditioning and association. This is a big one for advertising and politics.
Like Pavlov's dogs, but for people.
Essentially, yeah. We come to like or dislike things simply because they get associated with positive or negative experiences or images.
So advertisers link their products with what? Celebrities, happy families, beautiful scenery.
All of the above. Anything that evokes positive feelings. The hope is that the positive feelings will transfer to the product itself.
And politicians linking themselves with, the flag, mom, apple pie.
Classic association. Or even just serving food at fundraising events. The luncheon technique. Positive feelings associated with eating can spill over onto the person or message presented.
Does it have to be something major, like food or celebrities?
Not necessarily. It could be anything desirable. Good-looking models in car ads, catchy jingles played just before a hit song on the radio, even the Tupperware party strategy of associating the product with fun and friendship.
We kind of know this principle intuitively, don't we? We try to manage associations.
We do. We try to share good news we're connected to and distance ourselves from bad news. That study where students were called about a university football game.
Ah, yeah. If the team won, they'd say, we won,
Right. But if the team lost, it was suddenly they lost.
distancing themselves from the failure.
Exactly. It's called basking in reflected glory, or burging. Associating ourselves with the success of others we're connected to, especially when our own image could use a boost.
So we won. When our team does well, makes us feel better, look better.
Pretty much. It enhances our public prestige through association.
Okay, so wrapping this all up. Understanding these principles, reciprocity, consistency, liking, and those automatic shortcuts.
It's really the first step, isn't it? Just becoming aware of how these forces operate.
Because they're not inherently bad, these shortcuts help us function.
No, they're often very useful, but they can be exploited.
So being aware helps you, the listener, navigate things more consciously.
Exactly. You can recognize when a compliance tactic is being used, analyze the situation more objectively, and make a more considered decision rather than just reacting automatically.
Gives you a bit more control.
It empowers you to be more discerning in a world full of persuasive attempts.
Well, we hope this deep dive has given you some valuable insights into that subtle, powerful psychology of persuasion.
Hopefully some useful tools for thought.
Thank you for your support and for listening.